All right, so we're live. So welcome to another Run Wild with Us. Ask Us Anything. I'm Lisa Kastner. I'm the founder and executive editor of Running Wild, and which is Running Wild Press and RIZE Press. I'm here with Peter Wright, one of our acquisition editors, who's also one of our phenomenal editors. So we are here with you, in theory, once a week. Admittedly, I've been traveling quite a bit, which is why I'm doing the sexy voice thing. It's not actually intentional. It's just the remains of flying, probably a little bit too much. And so anyway, so this is our first time, I think, in what, 2, 3 weeks, something like that.
About 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks. So this is your opportunity to ask us whatever you want. It can be about publishing. It can be about creative writing. It could be about, and honestly, it could be anything. It doesn't mean we're necessarily going to answer you, but it does mean that we're willing to take a shot. So, like as I guess referenced, I've been traveling a lot. So I attended 3 conferences so far this year, or well, actually in the last month, and I'm going to attend one more in Ontario, California, another Comic Con. So it's been a lot of fun. It's always a blast to have a chance to sit down and talk to aspiring writers or new authors, see old friends, make new ones, all that kind of thing. So it's exhausting though. The conferences tend to really, like, you're on your toes from 9 a.m. until 10, 11 o'clock p.m. Uh, yeah, like for 2, 3 days in a row. So believe me, when I have a chance to just like lay down, I am out.
So, what was your goal to attend those conferences? You said to meet new writers. I mean, were you actively soliciting books? Were you just hearing queries, or what was your goal for going?
Oh, those are great questions. So for the Comic Cons, it's more of like we have a table, and so it's kind of like getting the word out about our press and all the great stories that we publish. For the Atlanta Writers Conference, it's a pure pitch conference. So what I mean by that is they basically sit you down in a room, people sign up beforehand, and they send along queries. And some people send packets, which is basically a query, a synopsis in the first 20 pages of the work, and you give feedback. And if it's something that you're interested in, then you just, you let them know. If it's something that needs, a bit more work, you let them know too. And then physically there, you sit down, you take pitches. I think we had 2 Q&A sessions, which was all of the editors and the agents together, just taking questions from the audience. And I thought it was really good. A lot of really great, insightful questions. My goal, I'll be honest, I don't know that I necessarily had an overarching goal. I just think it's smart for us, including you and Peter and our other editors. I think it's smart for all of us to go out to conferences and kind of give our perspective on publishing and writing and, what makes a great story. And because the more people who know about us, I think the better the submissions are that we get, and the more we can actually service the storytellers who are coming to us. Because, a lot of times, like in Atlanta, I was pitched a ton of creative nonfiction works, which was more along the lines of like, I don't know if you remember the biography Blonde, which was like, it was more like creative nonfiction of Marilyn Monroe's life.
Hmm.
So it was more things along those lines where writers took original, like real lives, and then expanded on them, obviously fictionalized them. So I just in general thought that was really interesting, that there was this resurging interest in that from a
Hmm.
writer's perspective. It also kind of helps me get a sense of, oh, Ben's going to join us too. Awesome. Hey, Ben.
Awesome. Hey, Ben.
Good evening.
How are you doing, young man?
Good. It's 6:05. I'm right on time.
As always.
As always.
I was just basically giving a skinny on the Atlanta Writers Conference and like what happened there and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so that was great. Got to see a lot of new stories. Also, what's cool about it too is it allows us to interact with agents and other editors and get a feel for like what they're looking for and what they're finding in the market. And a lot of times too, like you kind of trade, right? So I might be listening to a pitch from somebody who's doing like pure, something we don't do, right? Like maybe it's like hardcore mystery, right? But I know the agent sitting next to me is all about hardcore mystery. Well, I can just say, "Hey, Joe, check this guy out. You should hear his pitch." So it's a very whether folks realize it or not, it's actually a very supportive environment because really all the agents and editors, we all want to see the authors successful. It may not feel like it when you're pitching. Because I think we've all been there before, right? We've all pitched to agents and editors and felt like, this is awful. And it's because you're terrified, You're basically telling someone you don't know who seems to be like in the power seat about something you've slaved over for, potentially years. And, it feels like you're revealing your soul. And all this person's doing is sitting here thinking, that they want you to succeed, right? And so, or at least everyone I interacted with. And, so I'll just say, look, if it's clear someone's terrified, I'm like, hey, just tell me your story. You don't have to read it. You don't have to memorize it, right? Just go for it. And then we'll figure it out from there, And then the Pen Writers Conference, that one I actually taught 2 workshops. One on the value of social media and why even though you don't want to, you really do need it. Because in today's world, most publishers, like unless you're a really established author with a big following, you're not going to get like a big publicity team behind you. You're probably going to get a couple of staples that the publisher is willing to invest in, and you'll be lucky. So you've got to kind of augment that. You've got to put yourself out there. And I gave them like a variety of reasons why, from a business perspective. Alicia Delory is saying hi. Hey, Alicia. And Cree is saying bonjour. So hey, Cree, how are you? And then I also taught one on why should you go for a small press versus a large press. I'm not going to get into that because that could actually probably be like a half-day workshop in and of itself. Just because the market's changing so dramatically, and it has been for years. But yeah, no, I thought it was good. Then I was telling everyone that I think it's good for all of us to go out to these conferences, just to kind of get the word out about, what we do and who we are and what we're about, and to meet others in the industry and to, at least talk a little bit to guys who are like up and coming authors. So yeah, that was my last month. Yeah, month. So what have you two been up to?
No good.
I would assume that you'd be up to no good.
Okay, Carolyn Shannon Davenport saying hello.
Hey, Carolyn. Awesome to see you.
As far as I go, I just received the author's final draft of the book that I was working on with Curtis. So I need to go through that one last glance through before I give it to you, turn it to you. Excited about that. Looking forward to the next two projects that I've got. I'm looking forward to jumping in with those. I've already met with one of the authors. That seems like it's a really good fit. So looking forward to that. And still working, hitting the keyboard, getting my story moving forward, working on the short story for Ben. Just,
Nice.
Wish I had more time so I could write. These 4 hours are for writing, these 8 hours are for work, these 4 hours are for this. But just the clock doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Doing what I can.
It's funny. I do the same thing. I tell myself, okay, like these days are for whatever, and inevitably something trumps it, like that it just completely gets in the way. So I end up scrambling to get whatever done. But
I let the writer's mosquito sting me too many times. I'll be working on something. Oh, I need to look this up right now. And I go down some rabbit hole to figure out what the name of the tanker was in 1937 on Lake Michigan. It's like, who cares? It doesn't matter, but I got to find out right now. So.
Oh yeah. I'm also writing a short story. This one is not for Ben. It's for something I'll talk about potentially in end of July or something like that. But I'll write the basic outline, and then same thing, right? As you're writing it, you're like, oh, I really want to know more about whatever to make sure this is like, realized. And so right now I'm like investigating caves and underground dwellings in New Jersey. So everyone's watching this is going, what the hell does that have to do with anything? But it'll make sense when you eventually see the story. So that and the anthologies for RIZE and for Running Wild, the novella anthologies, I'm working on those. And I'm supposed to be writing a novel. And anyone watching this, you'll hear more about something that's coming out in October. I just haven't gotten off my fanny to really effectively pull together what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So, but you'll hear more about that in a little bit. So Ben, what have you been up to, young man?
I've been working on the NFG novel with Tim Shoemaker, and we'll keep it NFG. Let your imaginations run with you, whatever that means. And it's a good relationship between the two of us. We understand each other well, and open to telling each other, hey, that's a good idea, or on the other side saying, no, I don't like it at all, and we got to fix that or change it. And so that's I think the theme for tonight for me is relationships, because it's I love to work with an author and build that relationship to where you can say those things and not anybody's feelings get hurt or make them more terrified the next time they go to a publisher or an editor or agent or whoever. And then I've got on the back burner ready to come forward are the RIZE short story anthology #1 and the Running Wild Press short story anthology #7. So still not too late to get those stories in. Post them for us. We're going through the RIZE one again. And but then after that we have the RIZE novel from Rodolfo Serna, the Obsidian Wasteland, I think. Obsidian Waste. Kind of a dystopian novel. And then Far Away is Far Out. Or Far Out is Far Away. I never can remember the title, but it's in July. So we're busy, but not too busy. We've got some editors looking for work. So submit your stuff.
Speaking of
editors, we're fun to work with.
Mm-hmm. We are humorous to ourselves, definitely.
It's easier that way. Have you gotten any responses from your picture editors? I saw a couple days ago. No, nothing.
No, I haven't heard anything. So, guys, if you're watching and you are an aspiring editor or an editor, feel free to ping me in any one of these social media platforms because we are looking for some more editors. We've increased the number of books that we're publishing per year. And with the addition of RIZE, I mean, that alone, we actually do need more editors. So if you or someone you know is interested in publishing and in editing, please reach out. It's not as simple as, boom, you submit to us and suddenly you're a member of the team. We actually put you through your paces a little bit. But yeah, so definitely ping me, hit me up if it's something that you're interested in. So
very cool.
I want to go back to a comment Ben made around relationships. I think that I feel like we've always been about relationships here with Running Wild and RIZE. But it's interesting going to these conferences reinforced for me. I mean, I think everybody is, meaning like everyone in the industry, because, I don't know a single person who's doing this because they woke up and thought, fuck it. I want to go and edit a whole bunch of crap today, right? Or I want to go represent stuff that I don't really know these people. And, I'm probably going to have a second job anyway, because it doesn't pay enough, which is the reality, unfortunately, of this industry today. But everyone that I know, you're doing it because you're passionate about it. Like, you really believe in the author, you really believe in the story, and so that alone makes the relationships even that more imperative, because, you want to know that this is somebody, they want to be here, you want to be here, you work well together. And, from a business perspective too, there are so many stories out there that could potentially get picked up, not either by us or any other publisher. So you're really kind of looking for the perfect match, right? You're looking for a great story with great writing, and then you're also looking for someone that you can work really, really well with and potentially turn it into like a long-term partnership. So, I mean, like we've already had a couple of stories that were submitted as short stories or as novellas, and we reached out to the authors and said, this would be great as a novel. You should consider expanding it. And the guys did it, So, well, in a lot of cases they did it. But if that relationship wasn't there, then it's not likely we would have gone to the bother of that. If that makes sense. What do you guys think, Peter? What do you think?
I think relationships are the key. I mean, the backbone of our press. What I was just thinking is that relationships get to be so solid, in my opinion, because we're always on the side of the author. We're always watching out for their voice. I was reading something earlier today. It's like, well, this editor needs to be able to do this, you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to rewrite passages that need rewriting. And I'm like, that's completely antithetical to what we're doing at this press. And for an author, I think that's empowering, and I think it's important for them. It builds up their confidence, saying that, this, I believe in what you're doing. I want to make what you're doing even better. So that opens up, that takes away some of their fear, takes away some of their trepidation about, well, is this really what he wants, or what we're doing for the best of my book, or is it what he wants? Like, right. No, we steer that train totally towards the writer, towards the author. And I think that just makes our whole task a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable, I think.
And if Alicia's still with us, she may be disagreeing with everything I say, but I enjoyed working with her on her memoir, Something is Better Than Nothing. And it reminded me of a chapter that I suggested to move out of order. And she could have told me, absolutely not. It's where it needs to be. But I still would have appreciated the conversation that she was open to. And so it's that kind of relationship to say it's still your work. So I'm coming at it from editing it, of course, but then if you've lost me, then you may be in danger of losing other readers as well. So it's worth the conversation, and it's to be open as a conversation in a relationship, that it's not, like Peter says, it's not out against your writing or out against your ideas. It's just to have you be ready to support them and have that discussion and say, I'm not gonna do it because of this, and this is what I'm thinking, and there you have a conversation. At least didn't answer. Hopefully she's in the kitchen and can't hear me.
Probably. Don't worry, she'll come after you later. No, I mean, yeah, I totally agree with everything you're both saying. I mean, it's we're here to make sure that the author's writing is the absolute best that it can be, and we're looking at it from a reader's perspective. So, like I've had instances where an author was like, oh, I want to work with Lisa. It's like, yeah, okay, fine. And like, I'll tell them, yo, your story starts on page 40. And, the look of horror. And I'm like, I'm only telling you that I'm telling you this because if you start the actual story on page 40, you're going to immediately get your reader. But if you keep all this backstory in essence, then you're probably going to lose a whole up front, because they're wondering why in the heck are they reading, and until they get to page 40, they don't know and they don't care. And in today's market, very few people are going to hold out to get to that page to then understand what exactly is going on. So, any kind of feedback that we give, we're giving it, to both Ben and Peter's point, from the reader's perspective and with the desire to make you as successful as you possibly can be. So, Jack Cooper says, "Hey guys, glad to be here listening." Hey Jack, good to see you. And then Caroline followed up, "Awesome to see all of you. Also, love to hear you and how you are navigating writing and editing." I don't know that any one of us three is doing that effectively right now.
We're floating. We may not be navigating, but we are staying afloat. Well, kind of. We're bailing water.
I mean, I think I know, like, I try to set time aside. Like, okay, this is the time I'm going to be working on business stuff. This is time I'm going to spend on, editing. This is time I'm going to specifically spend on my own writing. And I'll be honest, I'm at the point, I'm like, I need a personal assistant because this is getting way hard to juggle.
I like the analytical aspect of editing, like what Ben said about moving sections around, and what you said about the story actually starting on page 40. It's just neat the way to look at the story, to see the pieces as they link together. To be in a passage where the tension and excitement is so riveting, and you're moving along, and all of a sudden you're in a flashback to when the kid was 6 years old, and then we go back to the action. Like, no, this doesn't need to be here. Yes, it may need to be in the story, but
Right.
not in a particular section. So let's move it somewhere else. And that can inspire them to come up with other ideas and other instances, but to keep the energy and keep the story flowing. They're not necessarily going to be able to see as the author.
Yeah, especially if it's not a natural transition, right? Because a lot of times the authors edited it so many times they can't see it anymore. So having another party coming in and looking at it and saying, this pulled me out of the story. I didn't understand why we were here. Or, this didn't seem to be, critical to this part. And sometimes, the author will come back, no, this is critical because X, Y, and Z. Okay, fine. Well, then let's talk about how do we make this transition from top story and backstory smoother so that you keep the reader and the reader doesn't say, why the heck am I here? Right.
Right.
So, yeah.
And having it in there because they like the scene or the location of the scene and it's well written and there's great dialogue, it's still got to have a purpose to the story and add value to the linear nature of telling the story. And linear, I say linear, even if it's non-linear, it's still a linear nature. You can flashback and all you want, but just let it make sense to the reader. Don't lose the reader. Don't make you mad at you.
It was interesting in this last month. It was clear that authors are having challenges in differentiating from a pitch, a synopsis, and what they just think is really effing cool about their story. It's not all authors. And I know it's really, really hard, to do it. But it was just interesting that it was, in some cases, it was kind of thematic, right? Like I would have two or three people, like one after another, sit down to pitch, and they would basically tell me their whole story. Um, and I'm not one to sit there and say, all right, look, you need to work on that pitch, blah, whatever. Actually, I didn't hear anybody get reprimanded for not knowing how to query or know how to pitch, which is great. I think every single agent and editor that I spoke to, we were all very like empathetic, right? So a lot of times if someone basically told me the entire pitch of their novel, I would repeat back what I thought was the core storyline, like the core pitch, and then just take it from there. Or if it was like, I'm so sorry, I'm really confused, I don't actually understand what's going on. uh it was like, why don't, instead of going with whatever it is that you memorize, why don't you just tell me about the core story, so yeah, that was very cool. I met, like I said, I think all the agents and editors I spoke to really went out of their way to make people feel comfortable. So Carolyn also says, wrong, I guess, when we're talking about how it's difficult to balance. You guys are doing what we all are doing the best you know how. Well, that is true. That is very true. I'm not sure what the best is, but I'm gonna bet Peter and Ben are better at it than I am. So, Ben, are you working on anything personally now?
I have a book of poems coming out that I can't advertise yet, but it's slated to come out in August.
Oh, so cool.
We're working with that with another publisher we won't mention.
How
it's a series of Coast Guard vignettes in poetry form. My old standby poemoir genre. I created the poemoir. So if anybody ever says it, you got to footnote me and say, "Oh yeah, Ben White did that." But it's just some vignettes from a 20-year career in the Coast Guard, the people I met and the places we went.
Oh, cool.
So stand by for that. It's called Always Ready.
All right.
Which is really Semper Paratus, but nobody knows what that means anyway. So we went with Always Ready. That
was a smart move.
I didn't push back on it too hard. I said, yeah, okay, that sounds good. But
Peter, are you working on anything?
I'm working on the novel that I've been working on for a while, and like I said, the short story for Ben that I've been working on for a while. It's when you're editing a story or editing somebody else's work, it's so much easier to see the ebb and the flow and to see how the tension is put in, see how the characters, the troubles that they're finding, the hassles and the difficulties that they're doing. But when I'm doing it for my writing right now, it's like I get all this explosion coming in. I got to hone it down to just one or two sentences. And for some reason, I know the first draft is supposed to be shit. I understand that. But I want the first draft perfect, line after line after line. And it's almost paralyzing because you sit there, you're just bending back and forth. You start the story over and over and over again. I've got 90% of the story written, but I've been battling with the beginning of it for months now, just because I want to nail it down, but I need to move past that and do the ending afterwards. Okay.
How long have you been working on the novel, Peter?
About 2-3 years.
Yeah.
That's all?
Yeah. I got that beat.
No, it's a neat topic. It's very, very timely, very important, and potentially, um, what's the word I'm looking for? We'll go with fire starter. It can cause a
Oh,
lot of
cool.
problems if I write it the right way, and I want to write it the right way.
Yeah.
Okay. I just like the title. So,
Title is actually Madam President.
okay. Jack Cooper says, "Hey guys, your first quarter 2023 anthology. When do you begin to edit and interact with potential authors for that release? In other words, when do you begin editing the accepted work?" I'm assuming Jack is talking about the short story anthology, not the novella anthology, because I'm already working with the authors on the novella anthology. So,
That points right back at me then.
yeah,
It's coming.
it's all you, man.
The process is to usually put a deadline in, and after the deadline, we'll go through them and read them and select them, and then depending on if, like in this case right now, working on a novel that I want to finish up before I start the short stories, it will be right after the notices that we've accepted you, and then I like to send an email out to the collection of authors and let them know my process of, hey, I may not be with you yet, but I'm headed your way, and have that
Look out.
conversation so they know. Yeah. And, say, what happened to that guy? I heard of him.
He disappeared.
But and then it's one story at a time, and then once it's maybe a story and a half at a time sometimes, but once a story is done and the author is satisfied, then we'll move it over to the manuscript and I'll move on to the next story. And so it's of course, the more stories you have, the longer it takes. But I think number 6 was only 19 stories, so it was a lot shorter than the number 5.
Yeah.
And that just shakes out of what we get submitted.
And for the novella anthologies, just in case I'm completely wrong in what you're asking, for novella anthologies, after it's been fully accepted, I usually set up a kickoff call with all of the authors so that they can all hear the same thing, same feedback, same process, ask questions that everybody gets to hear. Because a lot of times someone will ask a question that you never thought of before. And it's like, oh, wow, that's a really good point, you know. And then from there, because it's novellas, I admit it does take me a while to get through them because some novellas are as long as almost 40,000 words. So, you know, that takes a little bit. I am through pretty much the RIZE anthology, the first round of those. And now I'm about a third of the way through the Running Wild anthology. So, honestly, probably when I'm done the first draft of the short story that has a hard deadline, then I'm going to go back to the novella anthology because for my own writing, I like to give myself at least a day or two between revisions because it kind of clears your mind. And you can, or at least I can. I don't hear the voice that of the first draft anymore. I'm here. It makes it much more. I can look at it like a third party. So it's much easier for me to edit and do a round of revisions. So, although admittedly, I do the same thing. I'll write, you know, maybe 500 or 1,000 words, and then when I step away and I come back, I'll reread it, and I'm already in hardcore revision mode, right? Like I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense anymore, you know, and just knocking stuff out. And then the more the story evolves, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to change all this stuff in the opening, right? So, and that's usually when I go down my rabbit hole of things like random caves in New Jersey, right? So, yeah. Um, Carolyn says, as an author, my work has taken years and lots of learning and wearing different hats. When you're editing, it is hard work, very different than creating. easier when you are looking at someone else's work only 2 or 3 years, just starting. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. um, it's funny, one of the first conferences I ever attended was the Philadelphia Writers Conference, where I actually submitted, like, you could pre-submit a story, and I sent in a short story that I had been working on, and the author who was teaching kindly pulled me aside, and he was like, you're a natural writer. This is great, but don't be surprised if it takes until you're 50 to get your first work published. And I thought, okay, because mind you, I wasn't even close to 50. I was about half that. But honestly, I do appreciate him being that honest about how challenging it can be to break into publishing, to break into storytelling, and just saying, don't quit. You know what you're doing. It's just going to take a while. So, did you guys have any experiences like that along the way?
Where our story, I've had a couple experiences where my stories that I worked on for months that I had full confidence in get completely eviscerated in the first workshop that they went through, and deservedly so. Looking back in retrospect, in hindsight, but just like that whole shock of having your work being completely flayed and torn to pieces is actually beneficial, because it builds up a thicker skin, and it gives you the ability to say, this isn't me. This is my story. These are my words. It's not affecting me. So that's helped build my confidence in my writing, to build my risk taking, because I know it's all a learning process. So as far as having stories eviscerated, yes, I've got plenty of experience in that. I've not heard the 50 year olds till you know what you're doing, but I do fully respect the path that I'm sure we've all taken to get to where we are now, of learning and workshops, classes, degrees, MFAs, all the things that we put into our careers to give us this knowledge, to know that when we're looking at a story, we know what works and what doesn't, to the point where we can say, okay, well, let's try this. It's kind of like a two-person symphony to create the perfect tune for the story. So if that makes any sense at all.
No, it does. Has anybody ever come to you and like given you really positive feedback when you were ready to give up?
I'm sure plenty of times. Nothing distinctly comes to mind though. But I like what I write, and that's most important to me, because if I don't like what I'm writing, then there's no reason for anybody else to see it. But I believe in what I'm doing, and I do get compliments. I do get thank yous. I got a compliment the other day about a story that I've got out there, but it's not a driving factor. It's not anything that's going to keep me from doing this. I've said this multiple times. If I could stop writing, I would. I can't stop writing. I don't want to stop writing. I want to keep writing because I like exploring the worlds inside my mind, my imagination. I just think it's really cool, and I can come up with anything that I want to because it's my story. So
cool. How about you, Ben?
It reminded me of I am a prolific poet because I'm a lazy fiction writer. and vice versa. So it's not unusual for me to write 8 poems a day, but
wow,
just hop up at 4 a.m. and write and let the ideas flow. But I remember once I discovered Keith Douglas, who was a World War II poet. He actually died in the war, and he had written a poem, "Vergiss mich nicht," "Forget Me Not." And after I read it, I didn't write for 3 days. I said, what's the use? If that's been written and that's out there, and that's what I was striving to write. And, I found it. And when I found it, it was not discouraging, but it was, okay, it's been written. Now I had to reset the expectation and the standard higher and say, let me go to work. And what I'm writing is not up to that point. So it was even influences come from everywhere, and they'll say things too. And in 2016, I had an e-novel published by a publisher in England. And there was a section that the publisher bounced off a friend of his who was military background, and he kind of tore it apart. And but listening to you two tonight and thinking back, there was nothing I could really argue with because it was absolutely right. And I think if you open your mind to that feedback, that kind of feedback, and at least consider it and roll it around in your mind and say, is it right or wrong? Is that right? And of course it was right. And I rewrote it and was much more satisfied with it anyway. But I think the tendency, once you get a piece accepted, is to say, here we go now. It's rolling now. It's all polished and nobody can find anything wrong with that because it's 100% ready to go. And then some Ben White editor comes back and says, well, why don't you move this chapter over here? and it's got to be, well, I know it is. It's the initial shock and pain and hurt, and you recede and say, no, they just don't get me. But then you say, well, yeah, that's a good idea. Let me rework it or move it. Mm-hmm. So those instances are out there.
Caroline says, I'm still in progress with the short story I submitted. I'll be curious how all the process works, as I just took a shot in the dark with one I sent you. Can't wait to see how a whole book comes out and how you pick what works to fit in to make it all come together. Admittedly, we actually, for our anthologies, none of them are themed. We are intentionally selecting stories that we think are, if not are close to publication ready, and or that we can see what the final stage would look like, when we're reading it. And then we do, try to position the stories in a way that there's some kind of, flow to them. But yeah, we don't generally speaking do themed anthologies. So, and I want to apologize. So I actually sent a note out to about 138 people, something like that, over the weekend. So we use Submittable, and when we went through the last, like all the submissions that we hadn't responded to in our last acquisitions meeting, for some reason Submittable glitched, and it left out those 138 stories for us to look over. So I sent a note to those authors and just let them know, look, I'm declining these, but not because of anything that you did. It's because we had a glitch in the system. And so if you still want us to review this, please feel free to resubmit, because some of these were from like early 2021. A couple were from like late 2020. And I'm sure quite a few had already been acquired elsewhere. And if they weren't, then the author probably has already gone through some revisions. So, I apologize to anyone who got that note from me. And I also confused the heck out of some people, because what they did is they didn't hear from us in 2020. So they resubmitted in like 2022, and we accepted it, the 2022 version. And then they reached out to their editor and said, what the hell is she talking about? You guys accepted me. Are you now telling me you're rejecting my piece? And no, we're just trying to make sure nobody's left out, So sorry about that, guys. Hopefully we won't have glitches like that again, but Submittable does do that on occasion. So, all right. So we've got about 15 minutes left. If you're watching, please feel free to put any kind of questions or comments that you have in the comment section. What we'll do is we'll repeat your question or your comment and then respond to it. If you're watching this and it is not Thursday between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, please go ahead. Feel free. Toss your questions in the comment section. We always go back and check, and we will be more than happy to respond in the subsequent week. So, well, you guys, anything else you guys want to talk about?
Just that I recognize Carolyn's name now. I actually have her story printed out, and so it's in the works, Carolyn. It's in the works.
Very cool. And
I know that name from somewhere.
I think you'll love working with Ben. So I'm trying to think.
Alicia's not here to argue.
So I don't know how many people know this. Alicia did a TikTok video, I think, of using a Fluby, and it went viral. So that's one way you get a social media presence.
What's a Fluvi?
A Fluby, it's like a vacuum that cuts your hair. Like, yeah, I don't know that I would ever use that, but hey. Jack says, have you ever had material from an author that didn't require an editing overhaul?
I think Tom Milazzo's the Faith Machine was very close to being ready to go. It's still but I say that, but it even needed a good read through and some suggestions made. So they're out there. And but now with his work, it had a lot of people read it and give him feedback on it. And he was surprised that I found what I did. And it was some things like just logistics of what the characters were doing, and say, why would they go there first instead of going here, and work that out. He said, yeah, that makes sense. Why would they? And so I think any work that's absolutely polished is a unicorn. They just don't exist.
How about you, Peter?
Well, working with Curtis Smith on his first novel, there was some significant changes and suggestions that I made. Working on his second novel, I mean, we're talking maybe 20%, maybe 15% of the changes in the questions that I had, because he just hit all the points that we talked about with the first novel on the second one. That being said, we're still on round 6, so we're still going back and forth to get the novel as polished as possible, to get everything worked out. So we did work on it, but it was nowhere near to the depth that I've worked on with some novels as well as some novellas. There wasn't really need to go to dig that deep, because he put the depth in there and put the images in there, so we knew exactly where we were at all times. You just need a little bit of tweaking. I was really, really impressed. It's a really good story.
I'd say I've had one or two that only needed like maybe 15, maybe 20%. And it was usually, it's like what Ben referenced, it was like cleanup. Like why would a character do this before they did that, right? Or there was a subplot that they forgot was in there. And it was like, does the subplot make sense within the broader context of the story? And it was, the author's like, oh wait, yeah, no, forget about that. I don't know. I'd say that the typical rounds are 2 to 3. It's rare that an author I'm working with, it's more than 2 to 3 rounds. That may also just be my blatant laziness. Because, once those major items are addressed and, any kind of significant typos or anything like that are addressed, then I basically do a read through for like cleanup, but yeah, I'd say maybe usually the most, and again, so this is from books that, we accepted. In terms of like with people that I mentor, because I mentor for the Horror Writers Association, I mentor for a few organizations, and soon we're going to be announcing a scholarship that we're going to be co-sponsoring with the conference. So once all that's worked out, I'll talk about that more. But I'm also going to be in a mentor capacity for that as well. But typically, a lot of times, the mentees know that they have work to do, right? They know that, and that's why we're in conversation, is to help them expand their knowledge, expand their abilities, so that they can at some point, you know, send out work that is, 15-20% done. So, um, Carolyn says,
And
terrific.
some of that goes back to our screening process as well. If we see and read works that are well written, that's an indicator that the story will flow and maybe not need that extra overhaul, because we have seen some that are very, very interesting in their scope, but the work that it would take an editor for a small press like us, with that handful of editors that we have, it's just time restrictive, and we can't do it. So in those cases, I think we're very open to letting the authors know that, and say, if you can polish it and get it back to us, we're interested in your ideas that you have. And that's worked. Even a short story, I've gotten a short story where the font changed in the middle of the story, and why, I have no idea. And the scene changed, and the plot changed, and the whole short story changed. And the email back to the author was, "It's a great idea. You've got the pieces there. Running Wild Press would like to see you expand it out to a novel or a novella, and make it work and resubmit it." So we're open to those conversations as well.
Oh yeah.
And on the other side of the coin is, I've accepted books that I knew needed a lot of work. They would take me hours and hours and hours, but I fell for the writing. I was so in tune with the writing and the story and the plot that I'm like, I know this is going to take a lot of work, but I'm taking a shot at it just because I believe in the story. I believe in what this author is saying, so I want to put that work in.
Priya Meyer says, for novels accepted in November of 2021, when does the editing normally start? When do you start interacting with the author? Priya, do me a favor, email me privately at runningwildeditor@gmail.com, and or just message us in Submittable. That's actually probably the smarter play, is to message us in Submittable, and then I can look into what's going on. So thank you for that. Thank you for letting me know. So back to what both Ben and Peter were saying. Sometimes we'll every once in a while we'll accept something because we totally fall for the writing, we fall for the story setup, but we know that it's going to take a lot of editing, a lot of revision, and that's okay, right? I mean, that's why we intentionally try to connect the author with an editor who really has a lot of buy-in for the story, and has basically fallen for it, because then that ensures that you're going to get the best possible relationship. You're going to get, the best possible collaboration in getting this, so that it's ready for publication. Cool. So we have like 7 minutes left. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that might be kind of big to talk about.
Have you had any editor or any authors argue with you? I mean, like physically, or not physically, but really push back on your changes and your suggestions?
I mean, I've had some who push back, but as long as it's logical, right? And they address whatever the underlying challenge is with that part, then I'm fine. Because sometimes a suggestion is literally just a suggestion. Other times a suggestion, it's to address something that is that needs work within the piece itself. And so it's just finding another way to address whatever that gap is within the story. We've had 2 authors who threaten physical violence on their editor. And we then pretty promptly removed them from our pool and did not publish their work. So I was not the one who was threatened. It was 2 of our other editors, but yeah.
And it wasn't me, Peter. I know what you're thinking.
You just rub people the
Wasn't
wrong
me
way,
either.
man.
But
Yeah.
I've had some back and forth conversations with taking out, like I say, a scene that the author absolutely loved, and it didn't add any value to the story at all. And we went back and forth pretty passionately, which I loved. You know, you're passionate about this scene, but let me tell you what the reader's going to do, and try to open your eyes. And ultimately, he finally came back and said, "Yeah, you're right. The scene doesn't add value." And you know, spin those characters off. You like those characters, spin them off into another novel. You know, you write about them, put them in a short story.
Exactly.
And I actually had that happen with a narrative that is ultimately published. But one of the editor that I had looking at it told me that this character is one too many characters. You don't need this visit from this character. So I spun that character out into a whole new work. So if the character is good enough to be in a work, give them the work. You know, because I'm a big character guy, and good characters will find good stories.
Exactly.
And vice versa. There's vice versa again.
I've had one author who sticks out who didn't like anyone like, and I agree, Lisa. They are just suggestions. They're just questions. They're suggestions. They have the right total control to say, I don't want this, I don't want that. But he disagreed with virtually all my suggestions, which is fine. And then he would rewrite large swaths of the novella between editing. So I would get a completely different story on the second pass through, and on the third one I got another completely different story. Yeah, the plot was the same, but I mean they kept writing and rewriting to the point where I lost complete control. I had no idea what was going on, and I was out of time. So it's like, you know, did the best I could here, but this is the author's work. So, but fortunately, that was just one person.
Yeah. Oh, thank God I haven't had that happen, because I would go crazy. Like, when you decide what the story's about, then we can revisit this. But until then, yeah.
But I think those situations, yeah, and those situations help us as editors in the long run, because we survived that experience, and we talk about it later. But it ultimately helps us. It's okay. You know, the author may be this way, or let me approach it in a different way, and we grow from it. We grow.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. And I mean, it helps us figure out like what approaches should we take, right? And you know, how can we make this the most effective in general? Because remember, guys, we're all working on this together, right? We've all got full-time lives that we're navigating, as well as, you know, working on your amazing works. So for us, a lot of times it's just figuring out, okay, how can I make sure that this is the most effective interaction for all of us? And you know, sometimes the answer to that question, how do we make this the most effective for all of us, is not a simple answer. You know, sometimes we do, like, you know, I have one novella author who I gave him a bunch of feedback, and he was going through a lot in his personal life, and asked if we could hold off on having it included in that year's anthology and put it in the future. I was like, yeah, sure. You know, you know, because a lot of this is about, you know, getting the piece to a point where the author can feel proud about what's being put out there as well. So it's not us saying, okay, yeah, this is ready. It's a collaboration, right? It's both of us saying that we feel like this is ready to go. So, and with that, I am going to say huge thank you to Peter and Ben for joining another one of our Run Wild with Us's. And thank you to everybody who interacted with us in the chat. If you're watching this and it is not Thursday at between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, please feel free, reach out, put your questions in the chat. We will come back and check it out again. Until then, everyone have a fantastic week, and we will talk to you next time. Ciao.
See ya.
All right.